All right, hi guys. My name is Jared Bruning, and of course, I'm the guy who's been doing the daily bell ringers. Hopefully, you're finding the daily bell ringers something useful for your classroom. And I know, a lot of us are not necessarily getting back into the classroom, but are going to be going virtual, here very soon, or doing online learning. And I'm hoping today some stuff that I talk about might be something that you can actually use with your online classes and everything, because this is a year none of us were prepared for, and none of us really know exactly what to do. So hopefully I can give you a few ideas of things to do. I guess real quickly, just some background about me. I've taught well geography, world history, American history at the junior high level for about the past 10 years. And actually, just last year, I took on the role of an instructional coach, and so now I'm currently an instructional coach. So anyway, I'm hoping again that these are some things that could really help you out. So when I share these things, I'm not necessarily saying this is what you have to do or this is like the best practice or anything like that. I'm just simply saying, this might give you an idea because, I mean, hopefully you guys know how difficult it is for teachers to get into other teachers' classrooms and see what they're doing, especially on the first day of school. You have no idea what other teachers are doing that first day of school, really. So I'm hoping that this just gives you a few little ideas that of some things that you might possibly use. So what I'm going to do here is first thing, let me go ahead and I'm going to share out here on the screen
I'm just simply saying,
a
this
Google
might give you an
slide
idea because, I
presentation.
mean, hopefully you guys know how
Hopefully
difficult
it
it is
works
for
here.
teachers to
Let's
get
see here.
into other teachers' classrooms and see what they're doing, especially on the first day of
Uh,
school. You have no idea what
chat
other
here.
teachers are doing that first
Here.
day of school, really. So I'm hoping that this just gives you a few little ideas
All right,
that
so hopefully
of
there on the
things that you
chat
might
you're seeing
possibly
a Google slide
so what I'm
presentation
going to do here
that's
is
popping up
first
there
thing,
for
let
you
me
to
go
be able
ahead
to
and
access. And so that's
I'm going to
actually what I'm going
share
to be
out here
showing
on
you
the
here
screen
is kind of going through a little bit of the slide presentation and then actually showing,
a Google
how
slide
I actually did
presentation
like the first day of school. And I know there's all kinds of different approaches of how to do that first day of school, but I'm going to talk about the way that I did it. So let me change my view here over to this. So now I can go to my
all right, so hopefully there on the
slide
chat you're
presentation
seeing
here.
a Google slide presentation that's popping up
And
there for you to be able to access. And so that's actually what I'm going to be showing you here is kind of going through a little bit
all
of the
right,
slide
so
presentation and then actually showing
hopefully
you
everything's
how
working correctly here. You can maybe
I
see
actually
me
did
in the
like the
corner
first day of
and
school.
see
And I know there's all kinds
the
of different
slide
approaches of how to
presentation
do that
up
first
here
day
on
of
the
school.
screen. So
But
again, the first
I'm
day
going
of
to talk about the
school,
way that I
some
kind of did it.
ideas here. And
So
so my big thing is the first impression that you make. I mean, I always told my wife that, my entire school year was made in the first 10 minutes of my class. Like basically the tone that I set that first day. I know it puts a lot of pressure on that first day of school of saying that, you have to do everything kind of perfect that day. But I kind of had a little routine that I would do that would kind of establish this first impression. And you can see here, I just pulled this up, just Googled it, how long does it take somebody to make a first impression? They say within 7 seconds, people make a judgment about who you are and basically decide everything about you. And there's some research that say it's within a tenth of a second. And I know all of us are guilty of this. We'll see somebody and we'll immediately just make that judgment call. I know the worst thing is, of course, when you're a teacher and you have that one student that maybe you've heard his or her name called over the intercom, called to the office a few times last year, and it's like you've already formed that even before you even met the student. So that's kind of a difficult thing that I think teachers need to overcome, as we ourselves are so judgmental about sometimes about people that we need to stop and get to know people and everything. But your students are going to form their first impression of you in that first few seconds of class. All right, so my big thing for my class was I would always try to do something that set myself apart from the other teachers. And I know maybe sometimes it set some of the other, or irked some of the other teachers on my team and everything. But, the first day of school, they would be going over rules and expectations and all this stuff. And I would be doing something that was completely kind of just stupid, honestly. And I felt like that, though, kind of set a good tone for the year. I mean, not that I wanted my kids to act stupid or anything like that. And I felt like I had decent discipline in my classroom, but I did something that kind of set myself apart. Okay, so actually, I'm going to kind of run through what I have two different things that I would do. I'm going to run through both of them here. And so, I guess let me switch screens here real quick. So my big one was the flying trash can. All right, and I realize this is almost like a comedy bit or something like that. But sometimes as teachers we have to be entertainers to try to get the kids' attention and engage them and everything. And actually I'm going to escape out of this and I'm going to go back so that I can see my screen a little bit better here. And I'll put well, I may not be able to do that. Let me switch back here. Sorry. Here we go. Sorry, I'm getting used to using this
let me switch
this
screens
format
so my big one was the
everything.
flying
Okay, so
all right, and I realized
the flying trash can bit. Okay, what I would do is, of course, I would greet all the students at the door. I mean, I did that every day. I would be out in the hallway, saying hi to everybody as they came in the classroom. So, at the beginning of class, first day of school, and again, this isn't, this isn't in a self-contained room. This is a school where students are changing from period to period, going from science class, then to history, then to math or whatever. And again, this is a strategy. Even if you're not a history teacher, you could still use this. This is definitely something that would get the kids' attention. You might have to kind of change a little bit of how you do it. Okay, so I would be standing out in the hallway, and I would have a trash can there next to me, like one of them little metal trash cans. Okay, maybe about that big trash can sitting there next to me. But of course, it was kind of sitting there where the students couldn't necessarily see and didn't really notice that it was sitting there next to me. And so what I would do is I would let all the students get into the room. And I would give them, I would probably wait at least like a minute to a minute and a half. And of course, they start, chattering in there, and they start, thinking, well, why is the teacher not coming in here? What is going on? And so what I would do is I would stand out in the hallway, and I'll do a simulation here. I know this is cheesy, but I'll do a simulation of what I would do. So I'd be out in the hallway, and
but of course it was kind of sitting there where the students couldn't necessarily
I would wait a little bit, and then all of a sudden,
next to me. And so what I would do is all the students
boom, I would throw a trash can into the room. I mean, I would hurl it. I would hurl it, 10 feet across the floor into the room. And then I would wait a little bit longer. I'd probably give it, 15, 20 seconds before I came into the classroom. And so, of course, when I threw that in there, it was like bam, and then it was like complete silence. And then the kids start like, what in the world just happened? And then I would come in and I would start going into this routine, and I'd be like, holy snot balls, what in the world just happened here? Did anybody see that trash can? What happened with it? And so then, of course, I would have students who would start saying, well, you threw the trash can in here. And then I'd say, well, did you see me throw it in there? I mean, did you actually see me physically throwing the trash can? No. And then, then I would just kind of go around the room, and I'd really milk this. I would just keep on, going around the room and be like, well, what did you see? What do you think happened? And then eventually I would get to the point and I would say, well, if none of you saw me throw the trash can, but yet you all can agree that you saw the trash can flying across the room, we must assume that trash cans have broken the bonds of gravity and have learned how to fly. And so, and I would keep this going. I mean, I wouldn't let it go because, they would just, students, of course, these are 8th graders that I was working with, they would just keep on continuing to be like, no, you threw the trash can, you threw the trash can. Be like, I didn't do anything, and I would just keep on talking about what a momentous day this was, that, for the first time ever, an inanimate object has, learned how to fly. And so, the students, of course, keep on freaking out and everything about it. And I guess, too, I have to add, first day of school, this was like a shortened schedule, so I wasn't in there for the entire class period with them. But then I would get into the discussion. I would say, okay, well, I said, after this class, I mean, you're surely going to go tell some of your friends about this. You're going to go to lunch or whatever, and you're going to tell some of your friends about the flying trash can that you saw. And so I would start talking about, like, well, you were actually there when it happened, so what does that make you? And then we would start talking about primary sources. And then I would talk about what at the lunch table, you're probably going to hear that the trash can flew 70 feet and hit somebody in the head or something like that. And I'll talk about, well, that's a secondary source, that, they're the people who weren't actually there telling you the story, as a secondary source. And so I try to turn it into a little bit of a lesson. Actually, I'm going to switch views here. A little bit of a lesson on
and so I would start talking about, like, well,
primary sources and everything.
So what does that make you? And then we would start talking about primary sources, and then I would talk.
I'm looking at the comments here real quickly.
That the trash can flew 70 feet and hit somebody in the head or something like that. And I'll talk about.
Is that a little bit better on the sound? I hope. I see somebody made a comment that the sound's kind of going in and out.
And so I try to turn it into a little bit of a.
And then somebody asking about Ed Puzzle. I'll talk a little bit about Ed Puzzle later on. But hopefully you heard the whole thing about the trash can bit, about how I would throw a trash can into the room and then, turn that into an entire lesson on primary sources versus secondary sources. But of course, by the end of the day, I didn't let that go because I would come back to it again the next day, and I'll talk about that here in a moment, how I would do that the next day. So that's one bit that I would do to start the classes. Okay, good. I'm glad you can hear me better. I apologize. Hopefully you heard a little bit there about how I did the trash can opening day activity. Now, here's the other thing. A lot of teachers are probably saying, well, that's great. You can do that at school, but we're not going to be in a classroom this year when we start school. All of my students are going to be online. I actually think this opens up a great opportunity to do something maybe even more extravagant for, your students. I mean, if you're doing like a Google Meet or a Zoom meeting or something like that, this would be a great opportunity to, have something, like a chicken fly across the screen, or, something just completely bizarre. I mean, of course, you have to be sensitive about, nothing too violent or anything like that, but, you could really do something that would really get the students' attention. I think that's really what you need to do on that first day, even if you're just doing online learning. And I realize it's kind of difficult because you may not have a time where all of your students are on there at the same time, but hopefully there's a time where you have a majority of your students there to kind of make that first impression on them that, this is going to be a class that's going to be engaging, and we're going to, do some things that are kind of a little bit out of the ordinary. So, again, that trash can thing, it was one of my things that I would do the first day of school. The other one that I did, and if you're looking at that slide presentation there, on that first day, even if you're just doing online learning. Oh, I like that. Somebody said they had witness sketches. That's kind of cool, having them almost be like, they were at a crime scene and they're describing what they saw and everything. That's kind of a neat idea. The other little thing that I would do sometimes with students, because again, I taught at one school where I taught, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade social studies, all of it. And so when I was teaching there at that private school, when I taught there, I kind of had to have different routines because I would have a lot of the same students the following year. And so what I would do when I would have the same students the following year, the way I would start classes, I would come in with a notepad or something like that I had written a bunch of stuff on, and I would come in and I would immediately just come in and be like, everybody sit down, nobody talk, I'd be real mean and everything, and then I would start saying, here's the problem with seventh graders. And I would start reading my list. Or I would say that, the staff and I have gotten together and we've written down what are all the problems with seventh graders. And so I would start reading this list of problems with seventh graders, talking about how they're, lazy and they don't do their work and that they're too immature, and that, last year we had seventh graders that just, didn't follow any directions or anything like that. Well, then, of course, while I'm doing that, then I would act like, my phone started ringing or whatever. And so I would act like my phone rang, and I would take my phone out and be like, I need to take this call. And I would go out in the hallway, and then I would wait, for, maybe a minute or so out there in the hallway, acting like I've taken this call. And then I would come back in and I would go around to each student and shake their hand and, be like, hey, how was your summer? Or if it was a new student or whatever, if it was, I did this with a new class, I would go around and shake everybody's hand and basically, individually greet each one of them in the classroom. And so then we would get into the whole, I would say, what did you guys think of the first impression you had of me? And then we'd start talking about how they thought I was a big jerk, that I was saying all these things that were wrong with seventh graders. And then I would say, what about the impression you got when I came back into the classroom? And then we'd talk about the impression that they got from me coming back in and how I was much more personable and, caring and everything. And then we would talk about, okay, what are some things in history that maybe you already have an impression about that you think, Christopher Columbus did this when really Christopher Columbus did this, and so we would I would kind of pull that into the introduction. So again, it was a way to set myself apart from the other teachers, I guess I would say, because I didn't come in the first day and just simply say, okay, you're in history class now, I expect you to have a pencil and your Chromebook and a notebook every day with you. I didn't start with that my first day was just simply doing goofy things like this, like the trash can. The trash can bit was really my big one that I would do a lot. And so we would I would
pull that in.
So yeah, so I'm just looking at some of the comments there on the chat right now. But yeah, those were like my two ways that I would start school. I tried to make that really different impression on the students the first day. And my big thing was I really did not want to start getting into procedures or rules or anything like that on the first day. Now, again, online, I think these could work online. Like I said, you could do something very extravagant with the whole trash can thing of something that's just completely out of the blue that the students are like, what the heck just happened? And then you could, talk about it with them and everything in your Google Meet or Zoom meeting. With the other one, I mean, you could simply, read all those things that are wrong with students and then take your call or whatever. It'd be really funny if you could do something where you like flush the toilet or something, like you just went to the bathroom in the middle of the class. They would love that. But then you could come back in and then, maybe individually say, hey, Sarah, what do you, how are you doing? And then you just kind of go person by person through the Zoom meeting or through the meeting, greeting each person and asking them one thing, like, what did you do this summer? And so I think that might be a way you could do this virtually or online by doing that. And so let me flip over to my full screen again and go back to this presentation, because that was my day one. Okay, was the flying trash can, and I got the right thing here. Was the flying trash can and everything, and then then of course problems, like I got problems with 8th graders, or problems with students. And then the next day I would come in. The second day, usually again we were on a shortened schedule. The next day we would come in, and I would do this sink or swim activity. And this is something that is extremely elementary. Actually, this is something I picked up when I took my kids to Vacation Bible School, and they did this. And when they were doing it, I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? That would actually work with junior hires or even high schoolers. They would get a kick out of this thing. And so this is kind of, a very elementary thing. And again, this was something that, the second day of class, students are coming in thinking, oh, we're going to go through rules again. Because all my other classes, that's what we're doing, is going through rules. And I said, second day of school, we're going to do something really goofy. And I know this seems really elementary, and I apologize for that, but hopefully some of you have found, even with high schoolers, they get a kick out of doing those elementary things sometimes. It's not just all about, content and testing and stuff. They like it when every now and then you throw in something that's a little elementary. So I would do this little sink or swim ripples in history activity. And actually, let me switch back over to my other screen again, because I'm going to kind of show you how I would do this. And so let me see if I can pull this over here. I apologize for that, but hopefully some of you have found, even with high schoolers, they get a kick out of doing those elementary things sometimes. It's not just all about, content and see if I can adjust my camera here so you can see this a little bit better. So I would have a tub full of water. Now actually I would have like a big tote full of water, like one of those totes like you store all your stuff in for Christmas or whatever, but it would be clear. All right, so you can see I've got like this clear tote, and I know it looks like I'm doing a Mr. Wizard, science experiment here. That's not what I'm doing. But I would have all these just like random inanimate objects, like a pencil or a paper clip or, just a rock, things like that. And what I would do is I would get up in front of everybody and I'd say, okay, we're going to do a history lesson today about water and a tub. And so we're going to find out what sinks or swims. And so I would say, okay, Melissa, what do you think? Is this pencil going to sink or swim? And then I would say, okay, come up here and drop it in and let's see. And of course, she would say, okay, I think it's going to swim. And so, she'd drop it in, and then of course it would float. And then I would, I'd have like, a piece of candy, a dum-dum, something like that. I would give her and be like, okay, good job, you got this one. And then, I'd say like, okay, Scott, what do you think? Here's a seashell. Is this going to sink or swim? And of course, he comes up there, and all the students are yelling at him like, I think it's going to sink. I'm going to think it's going to sink. And they'll say, what do you think? He's going to say sink. And so he'd drop it in, and then of course, it sinks to the bottom. And I would just keep doing this with random objects, like I said, paper clips. Here I got a screw, things like that. I would do that with, and they would drop it in, and I realized it seems like, what the heck, this doesn't mean anything. But we would keep on doing it, and eventually I kind of had fun because I had my kids, they have a bunch of Jake and the Neverland Pirate toys, and I had a Captain Hook, and I had a Mr. Smee. And what was interesting was Mr. Smee was hollow, and so he would float, and Mr. Captain Hook would go straight to the bottom. So I would have them do Captain Hook first, and they would sink, and so I'd have some things that they would kind of throw them off, and they would get all worked up about. But then the cool one, and I know this is kind of sciencey, I would have a Diet Coke and a regular Coke. And so I would say, okay, here's a Diet Coke, and I'd have them come up and say, okay, what do you think? Is this Diet Coke going to sink or swim? So they would drop the can in of Diet Coke. And if you don't know, Diet Coke will float. And then I say, okay, here's a can of regular Coke. And I have somebody else come up. What do you think, sink or swim? And they say, well, the Diet Coke floated, so surely this Coke's going to float. They would drop it in. It goes to the bottom because it's got so much sugar in it that it goes to the bottom. And so then I would give, I'd give the students, okay, here's the Diet Coke. You can have that. There's the, regular Coke. I would give that out to the students and everything. But then I would get into the whole thing about the ripples in the water. And so I would say, here, if you look at the, here's my seashell again. When that seashell hits the surface of the water, you see the ripples go out. And what happens to the items that are floating? They all start moving up and down. There's actually a ripple effect. And so then I would talk about how that's like history. There'll be an event that will have a ripple effect. And so then I would say, what about the event, the amazing event of a trash can flying? And then they would be like, well, what was the ripple effect from that? And then someone would say, well, it was a fun day in class, or we found out about primary sources, or they would talk about what their impressions were after the flying trash can, and then of course I would admit that I had thrown the trash can, which they would all get a big kick out of it. Finally, I was admitting that yes, I was the one that threw the trash can. But then I would go through and I would start saying, okay, what about and again I'm probably messing up my dates, but what about September 11th, 2001? What was the big event? And they would say, okay, this is the big event that hit the surface, and then there's a ripple that goes off. What were some of the ripples from that? They would talk about the war on terror and different aspects of security and things like that in the United States that changed after 9/11. So I would use this as kind of, just a fun activity for the second day of school that they would kind of start thinking about history. And I would go back and I would be like, April 12th, 1861, and they wouldn't have any idea. And I'd be like, okay, that's the first shot of the Civil War. What are some, things? And two, you get to kind of get an idea of what the students actually know a little bit when you do this activity, because I would go back and have different dates, important dates throughout history, like, Lexington and Concord, and, signing of the Declaration of Independence, and things like that, that would, get the students thinking a little bit about history. And so that was how I would do my second day. My second day of school was just simply doing that goofy little ripples in history activity. So again, I think that's something you could do it online if you wanted. I mean, you could have a tub of water, and I'll warn you too, if you're going to do the big tub of water, make sure you've got like a rolling cart or something to put it on, because I had to go down to the janitor's closet, fill it up, and I mean, that thing weighed a ton, and I had to wheel it back down to my room. So make sure you have something that you can actually carry the water with. But you could do that, maybe in a Google Meet on like the second day, and just, you can even move the camera to be close enough so that they can see the ripples in the water, and then talk about how the ripples, in history and everything. So that's kind of my idea for day 2. That was how I would do day 2. Now, day 3, again, let me change my screen here so you can kind of see what I did on day 3. Day 3 is when I would finally start getting into what our class was going to be all about and what the rules were. All right, and here is my big suggestion. Hopefully you've got this slide presentation here. Again, if you look over in the chat on this live stream, you should be able to see the link there I put to this slide presentation that I got. I created a video about what the class was about, and hopefully this is probably something that you're probably already hearing from people saying, if we're going to be doing all this online learning, you have to create some kind of a video that introduces yourself. And so I'm going to click on this link down at the bottom. Hopefully this will work for me here. Hopefully you've got this. The link at the bottom here, this is my website that I use for my classroom. And so to this slide. I think I put it, okay, it's here in new to class, because after the beginning of the year I would change some of the things at the top to be like, instead of just like, beginning of the year, it would say new to class, so that way when a new student came in, they could just go and watch these videos about what the class was all about. So if you go to that new to class and you look down here, I've got a thing, introducing myself to some of the new students coming in, but then I've got this class introduction video, and let me make sure my volume is down here. least it should be. Yeah, the volume is
I think
down
I
on
put
this.
it, okay, here
So I
again,
have this
I
class
like to
introduction
read the
video, and again, I know
some of
I'm a nerdy guy. I like doing
things
the
at the top
video
of
editing stuff. I use a program called
say new to class, so that way
Sony
new
Vegas Movie
students,
Studio or
they can just go and
Camtasia
watch these
to
videos
make my videos.
about
And you'll
my
notice this
class.
is actually from a few years
So if you
ago.
go
I'm
to
a
that
lot
new
less
to
gray and probably
class,
a little
and
heavier
you
now
look
than I
down
was
here,
then.
I've got a thing
But
introducing
I would
myself,
have this
so there's
video
new students coming in. But
describing
then I've
what
got
the
this
class was
class
all about. And if you
introduction
see in this video, what I
let
did
me make sure
was
that
I
this
would
volume is
compare American history to different movies. All right, so I would talk about Star Wars or Indiana Jones, and then I would then tie it into about history and how that's fiction and this is real, and that you need to be excited about history class. And so I just created all of this. I was all by myself. I just had a tripod with a camera. And one thing you probably don't realize here, I was teaching in a school with no air conditioning, and this was like the middle of August when I made this video, and so I'm there in a tie and a shirt and everything, middle of August, trying to record this video. But again, I made this whole introduction, comparing different, things in history to real or movies to different, real events and everything. And so I've got that there. And then two, what I did, of course, since my website is such an important, critical part of my of my
I was teaching in a school with no air conditioning.
of my class.
Like the middle of
I also had this video. This was basically my terrible event or attempt at being a weatherman. And so what I did was I had a green screen, and I actually just would then sit there and talk about how the website worked, everything that you needed to do on the website. And so that way, if a student came in and they didn't know what they were supposed to do on the website, I would say, go watch this video, and it'll tell you where to click and what to do in order to find everything that you need to find for my class. So again, this was another video that just helped out with, so that when students came in, new students came into the class, I could tell them, go watch that video and it's going to show you everything. Now, the one that had the biggest reaction, and this is actually the one that I put here in the slide presentation, was the one about my classroom rules. And this is one that the students just absolutely loved this video. And so I put it here in the slide presentation, but you can also access it there on that class website. But I know I might have a few newer teachers watching. I'm not really sure if I have any newer teachers watching, but I guess the biggest tip I ever got about classroom rules is keep it simple. My first year of teaching, I wrote like 3 pages of classroom rules about, like, if you do this, this is what's going to happen. If you do this, this is what's going to happen. That's not sustainable in a classroom. You have to keep it simple. You have to basically just kind of have broad rules that then you basically say, okay, that fits within this broad rule that I'm giving you. So my tip, at least what worked for me, was to keep it simple. No more than 5 basic rules. And if you look at my video that I've got here, I'll go ahead and click to the next slide. This was my big video, like I said, was the one that was a big hit with the students. We would watch this together in class. I would actually have a worksheet that they would go through and fill out as we're watching it. And if you notice, of course, that's not me in the video there, because I made this into a very goofy, very, funny video. My kids, my 8-year-old and 6-year-old and 4-year-old were watching this earlier today and just thought this video was absolutely hilarious. But it was kind of a fun way to go through rules, because, again, students aren't necessarily expecting you to go through rules and make things funny. And so I would take a lot of clips from online, from different things, and put them into the video here, talking about what my rules were. And so you can see here, I talk about the fact that I only have 3 basic rules in my class, respect, responsibility, readiness. And then what I did was, of course, using a little bit of movie magic, and the kids, my students, were just like dumbfounded about how in the world I did this. I had it where I was the teacher, but then also I was also the student that came into the classroom that was demonstrating or modeling, here's what you're supposed to do in class, here's what you're not supposed to do in class. And so you can see here, I'm the student there alongside the teacher, and I realize this takes a little bit of editing and stuff like that to be able to do this, but I put myself into this role. And so then I would have myself, breaking the rules for respect about, like, not raising my hand, and then I would say, okay, no, you need to raise your hand, and then I would model the correct behavior. And then there's a really great video of Shiloh Shia LaBeouf yelling, "Just do it," and I would take that and put that in there, and it was just like, and it was just fun to watch this in class with the students because they had no idea what to even think, because they were like, "We're going to be doing a video about classroom rules," and then we'd watch the rules, and it was a little bit goofy and everything, and but again, I felt like this set a good tone for the rest of the year because even though we were a little bit goofy in the rules video, I was able to get the point across and model to them what I expected them to do when they were in my classroom. So if you can think of a way to do this, I would highly recommend making a rules video, because one cool thing with this as well is that when a student would break a rule or something like that, they would say, "Well, you never told me that. You never told me that was a rule." And I could say, "Well, no, you can go look at the tape. I told you it was a rule. You were there. You saw the video. You knew that this was a rule." It's like I had proof that, like, this is exactly what you were supposed to be doing when you're in the classroom. All right. So if you want to take a look at that video, it might give you some ideas of some things that you might be able to do in your, if you decide to do a rules video for your class. But if not, you don't have to. I'm just, again, like I said, I'm just kind of a nerdy type teacher that does a lot of that video stuff and everything. But you could still do a very simple screencast and kind of model some of the expectations that you have for students. And so again, I think that would work online as well, because this year it's going to be kind of difficult because of course you're going to have to create a set of expectations for online learning, and then crossing our fingers, later in the year, we're going to be having to establish expectations for the classroom. So it might not be a bad idea now, just to simply start, giving that to students and saying, okay, first day or first couple days of online learning, here's my expectations for you being online. And I realize a lot of us have school districts that have already put out announcements saying this is what we expect students to do online. But I think it's important for the teacher to also say, yes, that's what the district wants you to do. I'm expecting the same thing, but I'm also, expecting this. This is my expectation of what you should be doing when you're working in my online class. But it might not be a bad idea to go ahead and start saying right now, like, okay, let's review one of the classroom rules that we're going to expect when you get back. And of course, I've seen a lot of teachers posting things about, get your student prepared to be wearing a mask in school. And, so maybe that might be one of the things, like do an activity like that, be like, okay, today in our Google Meet, I want you to wear your mask for the entire meet, just to get used to it, because it's been tough for me. I've been kind of going back into work here the past few days, attending a few meetings and things like that, and it's I haven't been wearing a mask most of the summer because I haven't been around anybody but my family. So it's kind of tough to go in and sit for 6 hours wearing a mask. So anyway, that was really what I wanted to share. I realized you might be like, well, none of those are really going to work for me, or you don't think any of it would work, but I think some of these things could make it really fun, especially since you're going to be able to be at home. You could do some really elaborate things to get the kids' attention on that first day of school. It doesn't have to be a flying trash can, come in dressed up as Batman. I don't know. I had a teacher I worked with last year that during the online learning, every Friday he would show up dressed up as a different superhero, which the kids really got a kick out of. So just something that's going to be different, and something that I guess the kids aren't going to be expecting, is kind of what I would suggest trying to do there on that first day. Whether you're in person or whether you're online, do something that's just outrageous, I guess, that gets the kids' attention and makes them think, oh yeah, that's how Mr. Bruning started the school year, and so they kind of get a little bit more invested into your class there at the beginning of the year. So anyway, with that, I guess I really didn't have anything else I wanted to share. I hope that gave you a few ideas. I might be doing another live stream, maybe beginning of September, with how to do a screencast, things like that. I know there's tons of tech YouTube channels that cover that stuff. I am kind of a technology coach as well, so I might kind of share how I make my little Bellringer videos. So hopefully the Bellringer videos are useful to you guys. Hopefully you're able to use those in your class, or might just lighten some of the load for you here during this distance learning, that you can send those videos out to students and say, okay, here's the video, here's some questions, answer the questions, and then we'll talk about that topic. So anyway, with that, thanks for setting in on the live stream. Again, I'll probably post this later on so that everybody can see kind of some of these ideas. So again, if you don't have any questions or if you have any other suggestions or anything, feel free to put it there in the chat. But